You have started it, right?
It's connecting, hold on. Okay,
Good to go?
yeah,
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? I think it's on.
There's only what, 6 of us. No, but-
turn it, is it on
I
toward
think
you?
it's on, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, you can hear me, right?
What?
I don't. A joker in every crowd. So, hello, it is Monday, June 5th. We'll call this select board meeting to order. 6 p.m. First on the agenda is to approve the minutes from May 10th and 17th. I'll make a motion. Being here, just two of us here at the table, that we approve.
Second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm in minutes for May 10th and 17th are approved. Next up is citizen speak time, and we're going to do this a little bit differently tonight because we have the Honorable State Representative Smitty Pignatelli, who might want to entertain a couple of questions later on. So we'll do citizen speak specific to anything kind of outstanding or on the agenda other than Smitty's presence. And then after he speaks, we'll give people an opportunity if they have some questions to speak. So anything?
You have somebody on here that would like to speak.
Okay. Joanne?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yes, I'm Joanne Yerman, and I live on Baker Street for many years with my husband, Tom. I have some concerns with the changes happening on Baker Street. I'd like to share them to see if the board can help me think about them and how to address them. I have a few paragraphs prepared that I'd like to read, if that's okay.
Okay,
Yeah, so this has been Baker Street's been a relatively quiet pastoral road for 30+ years that I've lived here. In the past few years, however, there's been a significant increase in truck traffic, speeding, and people pulling over to fish in a few fishing holes near my property. I'll address each of these separately here. There are no through truck signs posted at either end of Baker Street. The road is windy and narrow and cannot support larger vehicles. There are culverts on the road because of the wetlands and streams, and they can be damaged by the weight of the trucks. In spite of these signs, more large trucks than ever use the road. Complicating this situation is the fact that there are 3 businesses which appear to use heavy trucks located at 52 Baker Street. William Nolan Trucking and Excavating, D&M Landscaping and Excavating, and J Diesel Engine. Though they're located at the Route 41 end of Baker Street, which would be easy enough for entry and egress, some of them, Billy Nolan's trucks for sure, cut through the length of Baker Street to get to 102. Also, we frequently see heavy trucks carting pool water, which we think may be coming from Billy Kai's. At the end of Baker Street, where it meets 102, is Kevin Holden's tree trimming and removal. He has heavy trucks and equipment, but appears to respect the no through truck signs and uses 102 for entry and egress, which we very much appreciate. With the rise of GPS and bad directions, we have seen an increase in 16-wheeler trucks and many heavy trucks which use the road as a cut through. The speed limit on the road is 35 miles an hour. This is widely disregarded, and vehicles often travel at 50+ miles per hour, which is troubling. With regard to the fishing, though there's parking at the conservation area a little way up the road, cars and pickups often pull over to fish. These are not actual parking spots and may be private property and constitute trespassing. Often the trucks are parked partly on the road, which is dangerous. The activity has picked up a lot in the past couple of years and is alarming and intrusive. With regard to the truck traffic, speeding, and fishing on Baker Street, I can't remember ever seeing the street patrolled or the regulations enforced. I was surprised and happy to see a police officer parked at the conservation area on Memorial Weekend, and I was grateful. So I present my concerns to the towns to see what solutions can be found for these activities and possible violations. As one of the few residents on this increasingly industrialized road, I'm interested in restoring and maintaining the quiet and rural nature of the road and our area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanne. Can you hear me?
Yes,
So, Joanne, being that this is not an agenda item for our discussion tonight, and one of our board members is not able to make the meeting, he's ill. Could I suggest that you send your concerns in, basically the document that you just read? You could send it to Marie Ryan's attention, our town administrator. And
Sure.
we also don't have any of our police department here today, and it seems to me that they would be a pertinent part of the conversation.
sure. So Marie will direct the document to the people that you're talking about who aren't present today.
Yes.
Great. Via email, Marie?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for citizen speak? Okay, then Jared, you are up next.
Hello, thank you for having me. Jared Gelardino, Turner Parks Technical Director, you titled this here. In my application, I gave you a little addendum for just telling you what's going on with the festival. Pretty like laid back vibe, so it's to be like healing and soothing sort of thing. I talked to Chief Borghieri, we'll have at least one police officer there. We haven't sold a ton of tickets yet, so if we get like to a bigger number, we'll definitely have 2 police. But for now, 1 is okay. I met with Kurt Wilton, the Department of Public Works. Person, whatever his name is. But yeah, we spent for at least 20 minutes talking about parking. I'll have a person down at the water treatment plant, directing cars down there. Kurt sent me photos of the great parking job that was done down there at the bike event 2 weeks ago. Yeah. I think Kurt not being here is great because he's the one that has approval.
So Jared, just for the benefit of our 2 people on Zoom and our large audience, you can just want to give a little plug for what you're doing.
Oh,
Maybe
well,
you'll increase your attendance.
yeah, Turn Park's annual festival is called Open Heart this year. It's a celebration of art, performance, dance. So much of it has to do with the war in Ukraine. And there's quite a few Eastern European artists that are doing works that are, they're dealing with the issues that are going on over there. And so yeah, there'll be plays, a few dance performances, there'll be a concert at night. Performance art, all kinds of wearable sculptures. It's a pretty wild, fun thing. There'll be all kinds of different things.
Sounds great.
Is she applying for license?
A liquor license.
Okay, I have a
Just
couple,
1 day liquor
I have
license.
a couple of questions.
Entertainment license, they already had that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
As far as the liquor license, what governors and or regulators do you have in reference to that? It's my understanding that whenever you're serving liquor, whether they pay for it or you're giving it out free, you need a tip certified individual that is sending it out. I'm assuming you have that. My major concern is how it's going to be governed. We don't want the town, I'm speaking for the town. Nobody wants any rowdiness, any problems. So what are the governing forces or factors that you put in place that has controls over these issues?
So I'm tip certified and ServSafe alcohol certified. We also have 1 other employee that's tip certified. So she'll be there the whole time and I'll be in that area. But we can basically working there, but also running around. And I need to go around and do things. So we've already had the talk about like over serving, things like that. Generally the vibe is not the kind of thing that people are like drinking a lot. But Yeah, basically like they're told to like keep an eye on what's happening and if people are drinking too much or intoxicated, they're gonna not be served. In the tip certification, there's all kinds of there's like markers, things that you can look at, different behaviors and things, so we both know those. We're conscious of that when we're serving.
Also, one other point, since you've been speaking to Martin Portier, is he aware and you have his blessing or communication in reference to I need your help, or if you do need his help, he's there to assist you?
Oh, yeah, I don't think Mark will be there, but they'll have another officer there. And we've done this in the past with the police and the festivals, and I mean, we've never, ever had a problem. Yeah, they'll be there to help, like, they'll be kind of like making sure that people are not obstructing traffic, doing things that are bad for the town, and then they usually make like a walk or two, like through the event to make up, see what's going on. And so, like, if there's anything going on that they notice, they'll tell me. I'm sort of in contact with them all day.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I'm happy to make a motion to approve one day liquor license for Kern Park.
I'd second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, Jared.
But
Fun to do business.
Jared, what's the date for marketing purposes?
Oh, June 10th. Not really even what it says.
Let me post it, I'll post it on the West Side Facebook page.
Okay. Our National Grid representative,
Yep, he's on.
all right, that's Donald. So next up is to approve a joint pole location with National Grid and Verizon, and that's on Austerlitz Road. Looks like in front of 20 Austerlitz Road. Hi, Donald.
Hello, how you doing? Good evening.
Do you want to just give us a little brief description of what you're doing and why?
Yeah, sure. So there's a new property homeowner going up and I need to install a mid-span pole between 10 and 9. This is a pole that's coming across up their property.
And Marie Kurt's aware of this.
Yep, he's good with it.
All right. I mean, I think if this has gone through Kurt and Andy, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, then I would make a motion to approve the joint pole installation on Austerlitz Road.
A second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Okay, we're approved for the pole.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. And next is our state representatives, Smitty Pignatelli, if you would like to come up here and let's go there. Where. So Smitty and I met Slared up and that, I don't know, a couple of months ago, we talked about a lot of things that I thought it'd be great for the townspeople. As copious as amount as we have to hear from Smitty directly.
But I don't know what time if we had a couple months ago. No, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Correct back up. The ball field behind here, so every time I drive by, I have some very fond memories of coming to West Otter, but it's great to be here, and I just thought I'd kind of quickly update you on where we're at in state government with respect to the state budget. As you know, we have a new governor, started in early January, so it's been a little slower startup with this new session because of the new governor. But the House did the budget the last week of April. The Senate wrapped up their version of it just last week. It's now in conference committee. So right now, knock on wood, I think we're still on schedule for July 1st, hopefully getting it resolved, the differences resolved. I don't think there's any major differences between the House version and the Senate version. I always friendly, jokingly with my Senate colleagues that the House does the budget in April, the Senate screws it up in May, we fix it in June, and the governor signs it in July. So I think we're still on schedule for that going forward. But a lot of good stuff came out of that budget. I think more importantly, one thing that we did talk about a couple months ago, I've always been a strong advocate for regional equity. especially in the smaller towns. I don't represent any cities, but I wanted to have regional equity, whether it be school funding or local aid funding, pilot program, the payment in lieu of tax funding. And the governor, this new governor actually just hired and just named a rural director. So to put their focus on the rural communities, that'll be cities and towns, but mostly in western Massachusetts. But we actually have some rural towns in Cape Cod as well and on the South Shore. So it's more a statewide program. I served with her. She's a state senator, a state senator from Stetzer, a small town, kind of in the Camden County, Worcester area. I served with her in the House for 10 years and in the Senate. She went to the Senate for 10 years. We chaired the environmental committee together for 4 or 5 years. She's gonna be a real asset. So when she gets her feet wet, I reached out to her immediately when I heard the governor's announcement about coming out to the Berkshires, and kind of taking her on a tour. She's really been very familiar with the smaller towns just in her own right. But I think hearing from you folks, maybe we can all get together at some point and let her recognize the challenge that small towns have that are in many cases very different than the large cities. Small population, small tax base, things like that. So I think there's some programs or some ideas that if you guys have that we can make our small towns run a little bit more efficiently, please feel free to pass them along and I'll pass them on to her. I think we can do some good things. So I think it was a major step with this new administration to recognize the rural activity and when it comes down to regional equity. We also talked about housing. This new governor has taken away housing restrictions from the Economic Development Secretariat, and we have a brand new Secretary of Housing, a standalone position. First time in the history of Massachusetts, we've had one person looking at housing affordability. I don't like affordable housing. I like housing affordability. I think this little spin on words breaks down the stigma that many people have. We haven't heard a plan yet. We haven't heard the housing plan from the governor. In fairness to the new secretary, who I also served with many years ago, is a former state senator and a city manager in Worcester for a number of years. So he has a very strong housing background. But they're again wanting to know what their plan is, what their idea is. The one thing that I really want to drive home on the housing aspect is that housing in the Berkshires is a real challenge. I have not seen personally a housing market like what we've experienced during COVID since post 9/11. Post 9/11 happened, that tidal wave of people coming in, especially the South Berkshire. It didn't creep into Lenox or Pittsfield or further north, but post 9/11, people came into the South Berkshire and paid a lot of money for real estate, drove everybody's real estate values up. I haven't seen anything like that since then, but then COVID hit. And that tidal wave came again. And as you guys know, even in West Stockbridge, people were overpaying for houses to the tune of $150,000, $200,000 over asking prices. Houses turned into bidding wars. There was a lot of cash deals. It was squeezing out the people that were trying to stay here, or the service-oriented people, whether it be tradesmen, turnpike employees, hospitality, the restaurants, anything like that. It made it very difficult for those folks to live and work in that particular community. And without a really serious, vibrant, local public transit system, it makes it very difficult for people that get out of their shift at 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock at night. How do I get home? There's no Uber, there's no Lyft, there's no public taxi, there's no BRTA bus. So I think housing affordability is a key component, but I want to live where I want to live, not where the programs dictate me to live. So the previous governor, Governor Baker, I was really a strong advocate for first-time home buyers. We need to incentivize people to be able to buy a home, build wealth and equity. I think the only way to do that is to own something, not to pay $2,000 or $3,000 a month rent when you can have a $1,000 mortgage, including taxes, and then owning something and building wealth. So he put in $300 million for this Commonwealth Builder Program for first-time home buyers. They got all excited. This is terrific. And then I read the details. It was only for gateway cities. As you know, in the Berkshires, there's only one gateway city, and that's the city of Pittsfield. So if I grew up in West Stockbridge or Lenox or Great Barrington or Sheffield, I want to have an opportunity to live in that town or a neighboring town, not having to move to Pittsfield or some other gateway city just because that's where the program entices me to go. So I think that this new housing secretary, I want to talk with him some more and talk about the housing opportunities. Now, West Stockbridge, in my opinion, would not want 400 housing affordable units to rent. Well, it would make a difference. And that's why I explained that to the Secretary of the Economic Development. I said, you don't understand that 5 in Alfred, 8 in Egremont, 12 in West Stockbridge, 15 in Lee. We're building an aggregate amount of housing affordability opportunities. There is no one community, whether it be Great Barrington or West Stockbridge, wants a complex of 400 units. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. We don't have the infrastructure for that. So it kind of spattering about getting that same aggregate amount, 400, but 10 here, 12 there, 5 over here, I think is an opportunity. So we have to find a way to incentivize, in my opinion, developers to build a dozen units. Because clearly there's more money and more incentive to build 150 units. But you have to have the land to do that. They have to have the infrastructure to do that. So I want them to think differently on how to deal with small towns. And that regional equity component, the rural director's position, I think are going to be a key part of this conversation. So I want to include you guys in this when this all happens. I think it's really important because it could be a game changer. For people that work in a local restaurant, work at Joe's store, and on Main Street in West Stockbridge, I think there's opportunities there that I can live here and work here at the same time. I think it's real. Now, the other aspect, we've made some, as you guys know, we've made some very serious investments in broadband. That live here, work there mentality, I think is really vibrant and possible. Why can't you live in the Berkshires, but actually work in Springfield, Worcester, or Boston? Or even Albany, New York. Why couldn't you live in Worcester and actually work in the Berkshires? So we invest in transit. The West East Rail is a big component, but the broadband, I think, is really a key piece. That remote work is real. I have people that work in big buildings out in downtown Boston that have been working here in the Berkshires for the last year and a half. What are we going to do to keep them here? I think that's a challenge that we're going to have, and businesses have to rethink. Why did I spend $200 or $300 a square foot in downtown Boston when I could rent space in the Berkshires for maybe $25 or $30 a square foot and work remotely from home? So we show them with education. We can. I don't know what we can't show with businesses as well. During COVID, we all suffered a lot, but we learned a lot on what we can be doing going forward. I've talked to mortgage bankers that. One young lady, she hasn't been into her office in a year and a half, and she's killing it, just killing it, working remote. So that's a real possibility. So broadband investments are important. Staying up with the next gen of technology, I think is really important. You guys are Spectrum over here, is that correct? Making sure that since they're the only game in town, making sure they're investing, and you guys are the licensing board, the cable commission, you probably are that over here as well. Making sure they're investing in the next generation of technology is something we really want to stay on top of. So that 10 years from now, we're not dealing with 5-year-old technology and we're slowing things right down. So we're getting them to make continual investments are going to change the landscape of the Berkshires, so I think in a very positive way, and making it attractive for younger people to come here to stay here and raise their families, which I think is a really important thing in my mind. I think the next generation is what we should all be focused in on. Because we're losing population, we're aging, and it's becoming a problem. So I just got back to California to visit my daughter. She's working in television in Hollywood, who likes the bright lights in the big city, but there's an awful lot of young people that would like to stay here, providing an economic opportunity and a housing affordable opportunity. Those are the things we have to work on going forward, so that when we have that generation taken care of us. So that's a quick update with the state budget. I think things are going very well. I'm still optimistic about the new governor, although she's been a little slow with all due respect. We're kind of rolling out some things. Talking about Salerno, who's done a great job in the Historical Society. We made a record investment in the Math Cultural Council, the largest investment since probably the late 1990s, when that governor at that time slashed the MCC budget 74%. Now we are at record levels. We're recognizing the value of this cultural investment. For every dollar invested, we can track $10 of return to the state. So it's a wise investment. It's clean, it's safe, it's historic. And I think those are the things that are going to make our town special. And the fact that the Zucchini Festival is coming back, I think it speaks enough that the MCC funds cultural, or festivals and things like that. So there's money that are out there. I encourage festivals and organizations to apply for them. When it comes to housing that we talked about a few months ago, Don't wait for the state to tell you what to do. Try to develop your own local plan. And then go ask for the money. We're not gonna fund ideas necessarily. We're gonna fund concepts that have been vetted, are ready to go, and the proverbial shovel ready. And that's what we're gonna fund. So if you guys develop a plan and what you think is a good answer to your housing issues, start putting it together. You may have to spend some money up front, but position yourself to access those state dollars, because there is still a lot of state dollars out there, ready to be put out there. I want to make sure we get our fair share and it doesn't get sucked up by the bigger communities. We're a small delegation. There's only 4 of us left. With redistricting, we lost a state rep. So there's 4 of us, 3 reps and 1 senator. But Boston has 4 reps alone. So every day we go to work, we're outnumbered. But if we can go there organized and ready to go, I think we're gonna be well positioned to reap your reward at the end of the day. So, but I haven't addressed any question you guys particularly have, or anybody on Zoom or here. And I'm very excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, I'd just like to follow up a little bit on housing, and I think pretty much everyone in this room knows that we are in the final stages of our master plan, which the town has not had since the one commissioned in 1959. We know that's a first step in laying the groundwork for a lot, and we also urge that the learning about chapter 40B and really the vulnerability that we face by not having any affordability in place. So it's been, it's one of those things that is basically a volunteer board with not a lot of municipal experience, like today you walk in and sit at this table. So it's been a learning curve, but we're figuring it out. We did have a housing trust at the establishment at our annual town meeting last month, I guess that was. So, and I thought it very interesting thing that you pointed out to Bob and me when we were there, is that the state is now entertaining some ideas, contrary to popular belief that we need to preserve every bit of land that's out there. But now there's a concept that some of these preserved lands, in absence of other public or town-owned properties, could be considered as viable options to carve a little piece out of. I just thought that was fascinating, because it's a mindset change.
Yeah, we have a lot of protected open space, but if you can carve out maybe 10 acres, build a dozen homes, type of thing. I mean, what Great Barrington did with their property on 41, they partnered with Haberdashery and Vanity. They're building a subdivision. It's first-time home buyers. Most of them, I believe, are going to be standalone, single-family homes, but I think there's a couple of duplexes. Sometimes the infrastructure is our biggest issue for a developer to do that and keep it affordable. We were able to get them, I think it's $3.4 million to Mass Works to do the underground, the utilities, water, sewer, electric, putting the roadway. Those are things that really save the developer a ton of money. So the collaborative effort and the partnership that was developed before they even applied for Mass Works. That's another avenue that, folks like my good friend Kurt Wilton should be thinking about. You may have to spend some upfront engineering costs to position yourself to apply for those dollars. The money's are there. We're still capped at $1 million. It's sad to say that $1 million is not a lot of money anymore. But when it comes to road building, it's not a lot of money anymore. So there's even talks about upping that amount to maybe $2 million. I've made a pitch to have different categories, so that here's a pot of money for the cities. Here's a pot of money for gateway cities. Here's a pot of money for towns, say 10 to 20,000 population. And here's another pot of money for towns, say under 10,000 people. So you're going to be in competition with Lee and Lennox, and not in competition with Springfield or Worcester. I think so. Having different levels of funding, I think, are going to be really important as well. And those are the kind of conversations I want to have with the rural director, the housing director. I've already had them with the economic secretary director. That we need to have more money, but categorized, because larger communities they do a lot of in-house engineering. Well, West Stockbridge can't do that. You can't afford to do that. It doesn't make sense to do that. But maybe a couple of towns coming together to pool our resources would make sense. Big advocate of shared services, that you guys know. I think that's a real strong possibility. I believe that's more of a money saver than regionalization on many levels. But I think there's opportunities there. If we have this new governor thinking differently about how to deal with smaller towns versus the bigger communities, I think we'll benefit from that, but I'm gonna be a bulldog. I'll be the dog on the bone, advocate for the small towns like I have been for a long time, but I think there's opportunity, the infrastructure. And I've said this very publicly. Infrastructure, in my opinion, is the one thing that could bankrupt some small towns. And if we're not careful, we have to deal with it. Now, I can drive by your town hall right now and say, geez, what's going on? Your roof looks kind of crappy. What are you doing? But the very road you're driving on could have water or sewer lines that are 120 years old. So out of sight, out of mind, but that's where the money is. And I think that's where the infrastructure program has got to be kicked in. And that regional equity, small town versus big town, those are the arguments. And if you guys attend those county selectmen association dinners, which they used to have more when I was selectman in Lennox, but having a county advocate with one voice gives us ammunition when we go to Boston. I think that's really important. So if I can go down and say, I got 18 of my communities supporting this idea of a tiered approach or infrastructure arguments, it carries a little bit more weight than just me being down there by myself. So the infrastructure, I think that's gonna be a real challenge for us moving forward.
And Smitty, can you give us your thoughts? You mentioned shared services, and you also mentioned regionalization of services. And I know we touched on regionalization more when we met. But can you just, you said now you favor shared services more than regionalization services?
Well, I think there's a lot of people think that regionalization is the answer to everything. And some things I think it does work. I think there's other things we're sharing but I think it would save the taxpayer dollars, make us more efficient. You think about the post-retirement benefits of health insurance and the pensions, sharing those with your neighbor, like what you folks are doing with Richmond, sharing a fire chief. Very simple thing, not really the sexiest thing in the world, but I have towns in my district that are sharing police departments, talking about sharing the ambulance slots, which were tended to be more volunteer, but I think are going more to paid and going to the paramedic level, which is the premium. It would cost a lot of money. Small towns can't afford to do that on their own based on the volume of calls that they have. So pulling 2 or 3 towns together and doing something on a shared approach would make it more efficient, make it more affordable. And I think we need to be thinking differently about that. Lee and Lennox shared a town administrator. I think it worked very well for 4 years. I think other towns are sharing police departments, police chiefs, those kind of things. Those are conversations that are worth fleshing out. It doesn't commit you to anything, but it just flushes out the idea that, where are we going with our police departments and our fire departments? I always say that I don't include Pittsfield or North Adams, but I think Lennox is the only town in all of Berkshire County that has 24/7 paid police, fire, and ambulance. Okay, we still depend on volunteers on the ambulance and the fire department, but looking long term, unless we get a whole new wave of younger people who want to volunteer, and believe me, I never wanted to be on the ambulance spot. I've done a lot of things in my hometown, but I've never wanted to be on the ambulance spot. So it takes a special person to want to do that. But the expectations and the time commitments that it takes, it's going to make it very difficult for a town of 13, 14, 1,500 people to pay someone $90,000 a year to be a paramedic for how many calls you getting. Having that shared component is, I think, is something that's worth the conversation. I always say talk is cheap, but it's cheap to talk. Let's have a conversation. And I think more and more towns need to be doing that. Public Works is the same way. You don't just stop plowing snow at the town line. Why not just go to the next intersection and turn around and come back? The water sewer problems don't end at the town line. Let's just extend those opportunities and, maybe share a water treatment plant. Maybe share a sewer treatment plant. Instead of each town spending 30, 40, $50 million, why don't we build one plant and then just have the water and sewer get dispersed the way it gets dispersed? With meters, we can do those kind of things. And that's just the out-of-box creativity thing that, my dad taught me this years ago, and Lee and Lennox were going to get together to share water. They had the Washington Mountain Reservoir. More than enough water to serve both towns for longer than any of us are alive combined. They couldn't decide they're going to build one plant, but they couldn't decide how it was going to work. So my father said, well, have this pipe going to Lennox, we'll have a meter. Have this pipe going to Lee, we'll have a meter, we'll pay for what we use. But who's going to operate the plant? They fought about who's going to operate the plant. It never happens. Well, Lennox went one direction, Lee went another direction, but in hindsight, that was 50 years ago. But in hindsight, that doesn't make sense anymore. Who's gonna operate the plant is gonna dictate that. Let's share the responsibilities of operating that plant. It's gonna save us all a lot of money. Lennox, for example, is just borrowed, I think, $40 million to upgrade their sewer plant. Lennox is down to 5,000 people. That's a lot of money. And they want to build a public safety building for $25 million. Now, these are all things that are going to add up. They're going to hurt our small towns and hurt the ultimate taxpayers if we're not careful. So that's why I think the shared service idea is something worth flushing out. No pun intended on the sewer line. But it's worth having a conversation, say, does it make sense? And because eventually you're going to have to deal with the same problems that Lennox is dealing with and Stockbridge and everybody else. So.
We have dipped our toe into a little beyond just our fire chief. We do have a shared EMT service with Richmond just during daytime hours to and actually looking for a second at the moment.
Yeah, and we talk about the workforce, lack of workforce, and that's a challenge in itself. But sometimes that the training requirements to be an EMT and now certainly be a paramedic are going to be a big challenge going forward. Went to an event last night and we talked a lot about the immigrant. It was a Kirk Immigrant Center event. And if it wasn't for the last 2 federal censuses, which we do every 10 years, if it wasn't for the immigrant population, the Berkshire population would have been decreased even more so. So that is our future workforce. Let's give them an opportunity, maybe invest in the training of the schooling or the licensing. That's good money spent. And I think the return on that investment will be wise if we approach it the right way. Because, knock on wood, I've never had to call 911 in my life, but if I ever did, I just want someone to show up at the door. I don't care where they're coming from. I'm not, oh, Kathleen, you're working tonight, what's going on? My wife just fell down a flight of stairs, she's bleeding pretty badly. Can you show up at my house? That's not what 911 is anymore. It's about emergency response and having a good fire department, police department, and ambulance squad working in cohesion, I think is really very important. And that's where you see more and more fire departments are being trained as EMTs, first responders. So I think those are opportunities that sometimes they don't get received very well, but over time, it just makes sense. Being a first responder is a first responder, and we should be kind of multi-purpose, especially in our smaller towns. So I'll give you my own personal opinion on a few things, which I probably shouldn't do on Zoom, but
Good to hear.
yeah. So I love working with you guys. I mean, this is a great little town. And maintaining the character of this town, I think is paramount for certainly everybody at the table and certainly in the audience, and I assume on Zoom. But preparing ourselves for that next generation, I think is a challenge. And we have to have that vision for where we're going. And I never wanted to be a one issue person. And I always said I'm more interested in the next generation than I am the next election. And having that vision of the next generation, I think things that will benefit this community will be happening long after you guys are serving. But knowing what you did during that window of time that you're there, I think is really pretty special. And that's what I think makes a difference. A lot of good things happened with my father, and a lot of good things happened before he became a selectman. And a lot of hopefully good things will happen after I'm gone. But I think what we talk about, what we should not be afraid to talk about, are the things that are going to impact us long after we're done. So, let's maintain the character of West Stockbridge, of Lennox, and all these little towns. And I think that's our obligation while we're there. Last thing I'll tell you, I love going to the schools, and I tell the kids that I've been there, 21 years in the legislature, but we have the oldest democratic constitution in the world today. Massachusetts. It's actually older than the US Constitution. And I've been there a blip. So I asked the kids, what are you going to do with your blip? So even though it seems like a short period of time in the grand scheme of things, what are you going to do with your blip? And don't be afraid to make a difference just with one person. And that's what can make life better for everybody. So that's all we try to do. And then the elections will take care of themselves, hopefully. And I tell my staff, I just do your job every day. You're not going to give everybody the answers we're looking for, but do your job every day. And I truly believe in my heart the next election will take care of itself. So that's been my motto. Knock on wood. I try to live by that, and I've done okay so far, but we have more work to do. So. No. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're gonna call this officially citizen speak time, just because of the control that it gives us over what the, I don't think anyone's wanting to be unruly out there.
Boy, you know, like Joe there.
They made a mistake of letting me know you were here. First of all, I remember years ago, you managed and orchestrated a visit from the governor, former governor, and the lieutenant governor, and a whole bunch of people from FBI to come here and tout the new broadband services that West Stockbridge was one of the first people in the area to develop. One of the promises they made back then was that every house would have service. I don't know who the people are in the administration and everything. Last I knew, there's still a handful of people who don't have broadband service. Here, name drops a name of somebody who's still active.
But, well, a lot of the folks at the FBI, the bad broadband industry, they're still the same.
Still the same.
Still the same people.
Okay.
So, you know, Peter Larkin and Jim Sullivan and,
Peter Larkin was the guy.
yeah, no, it's
If you have
that.
a problem, call me. I want to call.
Yeah, no, give me a call and I can pass on their numbers to you, but they're, the FBI is still pretty much the same agency that it was before,
Okay.
under this new governor. So if there's people that are not being served, I mean, I think that's something we need to light a fire and we can get that thing done. If they're 2 miles off the beaten path, you know, that might be a different conversation. But we should still be giving them some service, reasonable, rate to do that. So, okay, yeah, that's very fair.
Andy's been working on this
Yes, he
broadband
has.
issue
So
diligently.
thank you. So take out your notepads on June 20th, our meeting on June 20th. Wiley Goodman will be here from NBI. Here, yes, she's gonna talk.
Okay.
And she has a great outline. And she wants to succeed. She's a woman from Brooklyn, New York, that has moved up to the Berkshires, specifically hired for this position. So she's putting everything in order. We've been communicating, and yes, we've asked her, I've asked her to come to our meeting, and she'll be here on the 20th. So, and hopefully, not everything will be answered, but most of the concerns and questions and queries will be addressed at that time, and she'll be an excellent presentation as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's great. One thing I would encourage you to do, like I said earlier, you gotta stay on top of MDI, stay on top of the Spectrum folks, making sure they're continually making investments in the next gen of technology.
Right.
Because, you know, you remember the dial-up days, you know, we don't want to go back to those days, but 10 years from now, the way things are changing so quickly, we could be back to that, not literally, but figuratively of slower transmissions because they haven't kept up with the technology. So even in a small town, gotta stand, be the dog on the bone, and say, hey, what are you doing? It's been 5 years since we had the governor here. What's going on? Our speeds need to be slowing down. Why is that? Make sure we're doing what we need to be doing. I think that's the key. There again, that live here, work there, that home schooling, the home working. We expect higher speeds and we demand that. And years ago in Egremont, when we you file your IRS forms or your DOR forms online. I had a woman, a small business person, she said, I hit send at 11:30 at night. And it was a dial-up network, and I woke up at 7:30 the next morning, and it was still going. And I prayed to God that every sheet went through because of the penalties she would face. So clearly we've come a long way, but let's not slip back for the next 10 or 20 years.
I don't know whether there's any reassurance, but Wiley Goodman has a home in Housatonic as well as Pittsfield, and her office is in Pittsfield. So she has some skin in the game. Just wanted to get ready.
Even better. Even
Yeah.
better.
We know where address, we'll go cut the line. So,
Any, Bob, something?
Yeah, I'm gonna put my finance committee hat on. We get basically 4 income streams from the state. I don't know where it's at in the budget, chapter 70, chapter 90, pilot money. I think 28% of our land is under pilot. In the GGA, the unrestricted grants. What's happening with the budget for that?
well, it's still in negotiation with the Senate. Like I say, the Senate wrapped it up last week. We did it last month. So they're in conference committee hammering out the differences. I see no reason why this budget won't be done. The governor does by July 1st. But I think the chapter 70 to chapter 90, those are pretty solid numbers. You can probably go to the bank on those right now.
Are they going up?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I've been advocating to redo the chapter 90 formula. for a number of years, but unless you get more money, it's not a good formula.
Right.
But in the formula that I proposed, for an example, 32 cities and towns in the Berkshires, 31 of them actually saw an increase in their chapter 90 allocation with this new formula. Even for the same amount of money. So we did $200 million this year, which I wish it was 300. And then we did an additional $150 million for, roads, bridges, additional money you can apply for. So in an ideal world, it would be like $400 million for chapter 90. Ideally, even more so would be the new formula. So the 3 criteria with chapter 90: population, employment in that community, and road miles. Well, we clearly have the road miles. We don't have the population and we don't have the employment. So 2 out of the 3 criteria were at a competitive disadvantage, unfortunately. And I don't want to be here to be critical of larger communities, but I'll be critical of larger communities. When I say that, those larger communities can do a lot of in-house stuff, they're eligible for community development block grant money automatically, where you would have to apply for it. They get it automatically. So there's plenty of other opportunities. Gateway cities get a designation because we're a gateway city. They get more money because of that designation. So that's why I say the tiered approach to funding, I think, is going to be really important going forward. But I think we've got a solid budget. I think we're very happy with what we put forward. And I think you're gonna, I think chapter 90, I think Kirk could be putting things on the bid right now if that's what he wants to do. But it's not, doesn't go very far anymore.
No, that's
So I don't know how much money you get on chapter 90. Do you know offhand, Marie?
That 100,
150, 100.
Okay.
150, 160 and stay flat for
Yes. So
5 years.
with the rising oil costs that we went through, that impacts the cost of blacktop. Because of the oil components there. So when you talk about $1 million a mile, $150,000 to $200,000 to go very far, so how many years you have to bank money from the state to even just do 1 mile of road in a town that's got how many miles? You got 50, 60, 70 miles of road.
Well,
You know.
that's what you call miles. Is it paved or unpaved?
Well, good point. Unpaved roads are not included in chapter 9. That's the other part that we should be including, unpaved roads in that formula as well.
41 miles paved and I think 13 of unpaved.
So there you go. So there again is that regional equity piece that I keep harping on, that I think we all collectively need to be harping on. And I think that's where I'm optimistic with the rural director. And I told the governor, I says, I'm all for a rural director to understand the small town, but give this person some teeth to understand what's going on and then make some proposals that you will support. Just don't have me talking to selectmen in small towns and tell me things that I already know and not doing anything to follow up on it. So I think that's really an important conversation, but she's gonna be terrific. Her name is Ann Goby. I think she's gonna hit the ground running. She'll understand it, but will she have the ability to actually implement things? Is gonna be the challenge moving forward. So Massachusetts is in good shape financially. We got a lot of money from the federal government, as every state in the country did, but we have a healthy reserve. As the economy goes like this, as we all know, we've done a good job historically of flattening that curve. During the last recession, we were one of the last states to feel the pinch. And we were one of the first states to get out of the pinch because of our healthy rainy day income. And one thing I'm very proud to say is that we were only the 3rd state in the country to actually at that time go over $1 billion in our reserve fund. Alaska and Texas were ahead of us, 2 very heavily oil dependent states. Massachusetts was number 3. So I think we've been fiscally responsible, making some good investments. We need to continue to do that going forward. But we need to help you guys. We can't put the burden on the small towns anymore because the burden on the property tax, you can only take that so far. So whether it be healthcare, utilities, pensions, infrastructure, we have to play a larger role to partner with you folks to make it happen. So that's I'll be a big cheerleader, but I don't want to cheer by myself.
Music to our ears.
Yeah. So. All right.
Anything else? Yeah. So
No.
thanks so much.
So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your good work. Sitting in the next side of the table for a number of years, I have so much respect and admiration for you folks. And I know it's a tough job. I'm sure you get inundated with emails saying thank you. Just look like I do. But
They come with the paychecks.
it's reflective of the paycheck, it's a big too. But I really admire what you guys are doing and what you have to do to make this town special, not only for yesterday, but for tomorrow. So,
Thank you.
all right, good luck. Thank you.
We, next on the agenda is. Figure that, it's anyone on. We may need possibly a special town meeting on Monday, June 26th is the chosen date. That's just dependent upon some financials. That our town accountant is working on, so I'll make a motion that we will be able to, if needed, hold a special town meeting on Monday, June 26th. Second,
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
An aye, okay. That can go on to the books, Marie.
Thank you.
Anything else from you for select board speak?
Oh, I'm good. Said,
Yeah,
said what I had to.
and I don't have anything either. So. And Marie, we didn't ask you, you're not officially on the agenda, but do you have anything you want to report? Okay, so motion to adjourn,
A second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Good meeting.
Thank you.
No, we're really good.
He's just here.
Yeah.